Okay, it looks like we are live. Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Stern. I work on Firebase, and today we're going to get to know Firebase for web. You won't need very much to attend, but this is an interactive session. I mean, you're welcome to just watch, but you'll have a lot more fun if you follow along. You will need a web browser, and you will need a Google account. Optionally, a GitHub account will help, but you don't need one. What you will learn is how to make an interactive web application on Firebase in just 1 hour. We're going to use Cloud Firestore, Firebase Authentication, and Firebase Hosting, all of which will help you make an interactive web app. We're going to be doing a code lab together. To get started, you will need to go to this link. I'm going to leave this up for a few seconds, and maybe somebody could paste it in the chat, actually in the comments. That would be great. And that way everybody can just click on it. So when you navigate to this link, there, and the one in the chat, you will see this code lab, Get to Know Firebase for Web. And what we're going to do is work through it together. It says it takes an hour, but we're going to do it in a little bit less, and we'll leave some time for question and answers. So let's get started. In this code lab, we're going to make a page, an application for meetups, just like the one that we're attending right now. So we're going to make something that looks like this, where people can log in and RSVP for a meetup and leave messages for each other. We're going to learn how to build authentication using Firebase Authentication and Firebase UI. We're going to sync data between users using Cloud Firestore. We're going to secure our database, and we're actually going to deploy this app on Firebase hosting. So if you follow through to the end, you'll have a real web app that you can share with your friends at the end. Like I said before, you're just going to need a web browser. I'll be using Chrome. This might work best in Chrome. And you will need a Google account. Everything else is optional. So let's all move on to step 2. I just turned off my speaker. Someone said there's an echo. Maybe that will help. Okay. We're going to use a platform called StackBlitz. Again, everybody should be on the same page as me, so they don't have to copy off my screen. I'm now going to split my screen here. So if you go to this link in StackBlitz, you will get to the code that you will need for this code lab. If you hit the fork button right up here, you will get your own version of this code lab. So I'm already signed in to StackBlitz. You don't have to be. Yours might say anonymous here. Now your code won't affect anybody else. Along the way, we'll have various checkpoints if you get off track. But for now, all you need to do is hit fork 1 time. You should have your own version of this code lab. Now let's get on to doing things. So whatever you do in StackBlitz is going to be reflected in the built-in web view. You can open and close it with this button up here. So for instance, this code lab only has 2 files, one HTML and one JavaScript. If I go in the HTML file and change the word Firebase to hello, right away it shows up over here. So throughout the code lab, you should be able to see your changes take effect right away. I'm going to shrink this so that it doesn't get in our way. So all that this step wants you to do, step 3, is make sure that works for you. So just pick anything here. I'm going to change San Francisco to Dubai and save. All right, we see Dubai here. And make sure you can see the preview. If you have that, then you're ready to go. If you fall behind at any point, don't worry. You can either just watch the stream or you can finish it later, or there'll be various checkpoints. But all of this is available online, so you don't need me just to do it. Now we are going to make our Firebase project. This is the part where you need a Google account. So the first step is to sign in to Firebase. Let's bring this over here. I'm already signed into Firebase up here. You might not be. Now I'm going to click Add Project. It might say Create a Project on your screen. I'm going to name my project Firebase Web Codelab. It doesn't actually matter what you call it, and everybody will get a unique ID. So you can see mine is Fireweb Codelab 4E187. Last time I did this, it was some other ID. That's okay. And like, the name really doesn't matter. You can choose whatever you want. Click Continue. It'll ask if you want Google Analytics. We do not need Google Analytics for this project, but it doesn't matter. You can say yes or no. I'm going to say no. That'll make things a little bit faster to set up. Now it's going to create my project, which might take a few seconds. We're going to use, like I said, 3 Firebase products within the project. We're going to use Firebase Authentication for our users, Cloud Firestore for our data, security rules to secure our data, and hosting for the web hosting. Okay, now once you've created a project, you should see some sort of screen like this. You might see a sidebar too if your screen is bigger than mine. We're going to go and enable authentication. In the left-hand panel, click on Authentication. Now there are 4 tabs up here: Users, Sign-in Method, Templates, and Usage. We're going to go to Sign-in Method. Firebase Authentication allows you to pick a lot of different ways for your user to sign in, but today we're just going to do email and password. So click Email and Password and enable it. It's really important that we make sure you get this green enabled text here, or nothing is going to work from here on. Now, the next thing we're going to do is enable Cloud Firestore. We're going to go into the database column of the left nav. You should see a screen like this. And we're going to hit Create Database. In this case, we're going to start in test mode. Okay, someone is saying again that my voice has an echo. I'm not sure what I can do about the echo. I'm sorry, maybe I'll mute and unmute. Hopefully that will help. I only have one microphone. So we're creating our database and we're going to start in test mode. Test mode means that our data is going to be very insecure, but don't worry, we will fix this later. So you can see it's saying this is not a good idea, but we're going to do it anyway. Now you're going to pick the location for your database. You can pick anywhere you want. I'm in the US, so I'm going to pick US Central. Maybe one of these Asia locations or Europe is closer to you. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to pick the US. Now we're going to provision the database. Also, thank you everyone in the comments who said that you can hear my voice clearly. That makes me feel a little bit better. This might take, I don't know, 30 seconds on your side to create the database, the Cloud Firestore instance, and set up the security rules. Once you're done, you'll see an empty database screen like this. Let's move on. So now we have our project set up, and it's time to go back into the app and configure things. So like I said, there are two files that we're going to be using, JavaScript and HTML. In JavaScript, at the top of the file, you'll see that we're already importing all the Firebase libraries. So we did that for you. There's nothing else you have to do. But if you were doing your own application, you would have to add these things. So now all we need to do is connect this specifically to our Firebase project. So we're going to go back to the project overview, back to this homepage, and we're going to add a web app. Web is this little icon next to iOS and Android. It's like the two brackets. I'm going to call it web app. This really doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it anything you want. Don't check this box for now. Even though we are going to use Firebase hosting, we're going to do it later. I'm going to register my app. Now what that does is it gives me this big block. It'll be different for each person. As you can see, it's different here and here a little bit. All we need is this one variable, var Firebase config equals all this stuff. I'm going to copy that. Then we're going to add it to the JavaScript file in the codelab. So here around line 26 of the codelab, there's a commented out part that says add Firebase project configuration object. We already have a commented out version that's empty. I'm going to replace that with mine. And then I'm going to uncomment this line here. Okay, so now you should have a variable called Firebase config, and you should call Firebase, initialize that Firebase config. You can see that's exactly actually what the console told us to do. The important thing is that you have your own configuration inside the JavaScript file here. And it should be around line 26, where it already was. If for some reason you missed this screen in the console, there's instructions in the codelab on where to go get it. You can get it in the options here, but I'm just going to keep moving and hope that everybody got it right. But this green box will tell you how to do it. All right, we're on to step 6, and now we're going to get to the good stuff, because all we've been doing so far is setting up, and now we're actually going to write some code. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that our users can authenticate into the app, that they can sign in. We're going to use Firebase UI, which is a library that gives you a pre-built user interface for Firebase authentication. So we don't have to build an email field and a password field. It's going to all come out of the box for us. So we actually have already done a little bit of the work for you. This is just some options for Firebase UI. It says that we're going to use email and password. This is where if you're adding Facebook or Google login to your app, you would add more things here. Now pretty much from here on out, we're going to be working at the bottom of the JavaScript file for most of everything else. So what it wants us to do is add this line, which is actually already here in comments, but I'll just replace it, saying that we want to use Firebase UI. Now we're going to flip back to the HTML, and we're going to add a button that we can use to sign in and out. So we're going to go to the event details container, which is here around line 14. And we're going to add a button. It doesn't exactly matter where. I'm going to put it below October 30th. And while I change this to Dubai, it says San Francisco for you probably. So I'm going to add a button here in the HTML. If we open our little preview, we can see I have an RSVP button now that I didn't have before. It could be here. It could be here. It's all the same. All right. Now, when I click the button, nothing happens. So next thing we got to do is actually make it do something. But right now, your app should look something like this. Change this back to San Francisco so that I match it. Now, we need to set up a click listener on that button. we have the code here to copy and paste. We're going to put it at the bottom of the file. So when the RSVP button is clicked, we're going to start Firebase UI inside of a container on the page. So it's important that these lines are below these lines and these lines because we're referencing some of those variables. All right, let's look at our preview now. Now when I click the button, cool, there's a new sign-in form. So Firebase UI is this whole bit here. And actually, we can sign in now, even though our app doesn't do anything. So you could sign with any email. I'm going to use test@test.com. For my name, I will be test user. My password, I will choose test. My app has no users, so this won't be taken. And I'm going to hit save, not in Chrome. So I saved the user, but nothing changed in my app because we haven't written any logic yet. But if I go back to Firebase and go to Authentication, I can see that my user is here. So that really worked. That form that we created actually sent the user securely to the backend. It gave me a user ID, and it kept my email. If I was to try to sign in again with the same user, very good at typing today. It'll just ask me for my password this time instead of my name because I'm already signed up and it can tell. Okay, so now our page just has a button that starts a signed in form. And we already did this part where we went back and looked at the user. So that's pretty good for 3 or 4 lines of code. We've already gotten somewhere. But what we really want to do is make the UI react when the user logs in. So now I'm going to take these lines of code here and add them at the end. Now, what this says, we're using Firebase Authentication, and we're adding a listener whenever the authentication state changes. If there is a user, means I'm signed in, then I want the button to say log out. And if there's not a user, this means I'm signed out, I want the button to say RSVP. So in our preview now, you can see that the button changed to log out because I am signed in. Of course, when I click the log out button, it doesn't actually do what I want. It still asks me to sign in. So we need to keep working. Now, here we're going to go change some code from before. So here we say what happens when we click the button. No matter what, currently, when we click the button, it's starting the sign-in. Instead, I'm actually going to replace this whole block. We're going to change what the button does depending on the context. So if Firebase auth has a user, that means I'm logged in, then I want to sign out. Otherwise, I want to sign in. Let's quickly try it. It's a log out button. Log out. Log back in. And it worked. So we've been here for 15 minutes, and we already built a authentication system in our real website, which is amazing, honestly. Even though I've done this many times, I'm still impressed. I used to take days to do that. So at this point, you should have what I just showed you, a login, log out button. If you got stuck, what you can do is start from this checkpoint. So this is a new stack blitz that contains everything we've done already. You will have to go back and do this part again, though, and add your configuration. But if anybody here, if your app is not working, if you got stuck, you can catch up by going to this checkpoint. Well, I didn't get stuck, so I'm going to keep going. Now everybody's on step 7, and this is where things are going to get very interesting because we're now going to write to the database and allow users to talk to each other. So the database we've chosen, or I've chosen for you, is Cloud Firestore. Cloud Firestore is a NoSQL database. Some of you may have worked with NoSQL before. The main concept are documents and collections. So we're going to make a collection called the guest book, And the documents in the collection will be whatever our guests want to say to each other, messages. So it'll have the person's name, when they wrote it, and who they are. And a collection is just a bunch of documents. In Firestore, you don't have to create the collection at any point. You just start writing data, and the database will figure it out. Okay, so there's nothing we have to do yet. There's a link here to an amazing series of videos by one of my coworkers if you want to learn more about Firestore. All right. Sorry, my browser freaked out a little bit. I'm still on step 7, and I'm down in this section called Add Messages to Firestore. We're going to go back to the HTML file, okay? We're going to find the guestbook container, which is an empty section at the bottom. And we're going to add a form to it. So I'll just replace the whole section, but you can do whatever you want. So now we have this little form, discussion, leave a message. Of course, if I type, nothing happens. Actually, it refreshes the page because that's what HTML does by default. What we want to happen is whatever I type in here needs to go to the database. Well, that's actually going to be pretty easy. But for now, just make sure your app looks like this. You have a form, you still have the button from before. Like I said, what we want to do is add the message to the guestbook collection of the database by creating a new document. So we're going to do this in JavaScript. And I'm going to add this bunch of code, and then I'll explain it. So let's copy this whole thing to the bottom. Now here's what we're saying. We're saying that whenever the form is submitted, this is an HTML event, the first thing I want to do is not have it do what it did before, which is redirect the whole page. Now I want to go within Firestore in the guest book collection, and I want to add a document. A document is just a bunch of keys and values, like a JSON. So the text of the document is going to be whatever is in the form, the value of the input. The time is right now. Now here's something interesting. The name and the user ID are going to come from Firebase auth. So I'll say, for the name, I want the current user's display name. And for the user ID, I want the current user's ID. Now this means that it'll work, but it would actually break if we're signed out because of this current user part. But I'm just going to prove to you that it works. So I am signed in. If you're signed out, don't try this. And I'm going to say, hello, my first message. Now, where did that go? In the Firebase console, if I go back to my database, look at that. There's a new document that says, hello, my first message. So literally with 3 or 4 lines of code, we were able to send data over the internet to Firebase, which is pretty great. But we have to fix this bug that we have right now, which is that even if you're signed out, you can still see this form. And that's bad because it'll break. And we only want people who are signed in. So if you scroll back up in your JavaScript, we have this part here where we're listening for the sign-in state. Right now, all we're doing is turning the button to log in or log out. We're going to replace this. There's only 2 new lines, but I'm going to replace this whole listener. And now what we're going to do is hide or show the whole guestbook container, depending on if we're signed in or signed out. So now, when I'm signed out, there's no guestbook. When I sign in, there is a guestbook. Okay, so we fixed one bug right here. What we're going to do now is make sure this still works. Hello, another one. I already did this part a little bit, but if you flip into the database part of the console, everything is appearing in real time because Firestore is a real-time database. So there's no need to refresh, which is amazing. Now, of course, what we really want is for this data to be inside of our application And that's what we're going to add next. And that's the best part. Again, if you're stuck, this is another point to pause and either try to fix your bug if something's not working, or if you give up, do this checkpoint. Again, if you do the checkpoint, you will have to make sure you go back and do this step again. But other than that, the checkpoint should contain everything that we've done so far. So just to make sure that we're sufficiently impressed with ourselves, what we've done so far is add an authentication system and a database that sends data securely in real time to Firestore. And we've only written, I don't know, 25 lines of code. So we're doing a great job. Now let's make sure that the app can show us the data. So in the HTML file, okay, now we're on step 8, reading messages. In the HTML file, we have this guestbook container, which has the form. We're going to add a new section after the form. The section is nothing, it's just empty. This is where we're going to put our data. So you should now have guestbook container, discussion, leave a message, and a new section. Now we're going to use JavaScript to read the messages from the database and put them in the HTML. So we're going to add a whole big block to the bottom. I'll explain it after I copy it. So what we're going to say is Firestore. I want to take the whole collection, the guestbook. I want to order it by timestamp, so we get the newest messages first. That's timestamp descending. And then we're going to call this method onSnapshot. There's some description of it here, but basically onSnapshot is a real-time listener to the data. So anytime the data changes, we're going to get a new callback. What we're going to do inside the callback is nothing special. It's just making HTML. We're going to say for each message, for each document, I'm going to add a new entry to the page. And actually, if I open up my page, boom, right there are the 2 messages I sent from Firebase. Now, who wants to see what I think is kind of a magic trick? Like I said, this is a real-time listener. So I'm not going to touch any code. I'm going to go back to the console. I'm going to change my first message to goodbye. Before I can even flip back to the page, it is already there. So that's really the magic of using a database like Cloud Firestore, is that we have automatic synchronization from the database to your code. And we didn't have to write any complicated code at all. Okay, so I might have skipped ahead a little bit here, but basically we have proven that we can get the data into our app and that we can change it in the console and that we can see the changes. So again, your app should look like this. You should be able to write messages. They should appear. Oh, I guess I should prove that that works. The third one, it appears right away, and it's here. There's now 3. If you got stuck, I've repeated myself a few times, but there's another checkpoint here. So this will get you all the way to the end of step 8 or whatever step we're on right now. Now, when we started, we told Firestore that we want it to be in test mode, but that is not very secure. So all this data we've been writing, these messages, are very easy to hack right now because we didn't secure our data. But we're going to do that right now so that we don't create an insecure database. Now, in the database tab of the console, in case you're not there, we go to the rules page. Right now, our rules say a bunch of stuff about how it's not secure and we're doing it wrong. We are open to attackers. We're going to fix that. If you want to learn more about security rules, there's a lot to learn. You should check out this YouTube playlist, but for now, we're just going to do the real basics. So these aren't even real rules right now, but a basic rules file looks like this. It says, I'm securing the Cloud Firestore service. I want to match my database, to ignore that part. And now here's what I'm saying is I want to secure everything within the guestbook collection, any entry. These brackets are sort of like wildcards. So I want to add some rules here that control who can read and write data. Now I'm going to copy this and then I'm going to explain it. Here's the basic rules. So here I'm going to say, within guestbooks, I will let people read data if their authentication is not equal to null. This basically means if you sign into the app, you can read data. If you don't sign into the app, you can't read data. That's a good idea. That means that random hackers can't read our data. Now you can only write the data if your user ID is equal to the user ID of the resource that you're writing. What do I mean by that? In our data, well, actually, I can show you in the code. We write a user ID with each document. So we need to make sure that these match, that people don't try to impersonate each other. So I can't just put my user ID as 123. The security rule will block me. And that's good. We're going to go one step further, but this is already secure, but we're going to also use it to validate our data. So let's replace all these rules again. Now our rules are only going to succeed. This is all the same. We're also going to make sure that all of our documents have a name field, a text field, and a timestamp field. So this means that we are always going to make sure that the data looks right and that we can't make mistakes in our database. Otherwise, the security rules will block it. But now we've actually caused a problem for ourselves. And the problem is, we're going to flip back to the app now. Our rules are secure. We are doing this operation where we read the data no matter what. And the problem is that our rules say you can only read data if you're signed in. But our code says that we just always want to read the data. The problem with that is that this will cause an error if we're not signed in, if we hit the log out button. So we're actually going to get rid of this. And we're going to put it inside a function. So again, we're just for a reminder, we're on step 9. We're near the bottom. I'm going to make this function subscribe guestbook and replace it. All this code inside of it is almost identical to the previous code. The only difference is that we're now going to store the listener in a variable called guestbook listener. And we're not going to call this function until it's the right time. We also need another function called unsubscribe guestbook, which we can copy and paste. And what this does is unregister the listener when it's time. So if you're already guessing what we're going to do, when we log in, we're going to subscribe. When we log out, we're going to unsubscribe. So this is telling us to go back to the part of our code. It's around line 70 for me. I don't know where it is for you, where we react to the user signing in. And so we're going to subscribe when the user signs in. That's what it says here. And we're going to unsubscribe when the user signs out. You can also just copy and paste this whole block and replace it like we've been doing. Let's do that just to make sure that I got everything right. So now, nothing should be different, but it's actually secure. So when we log out, we're going to stop listening to data. When we log in, we get all of our data back. I can send new messages. Hey. And actually, I'm going to try to make a second user. So test2 at test.com. Okay. That's for this. Okay, so now we have a multi-user chat room. So if you were to share this link with your friends, then every user will be able to chat, and they can only, because of the security rules, we're sure that each person really wrote their own messages. Nobody can impersonate each other. If you got stuck, we have one last checkpoint for you at this last link. All of the disclaimers apply. Okay, we are getting to the very last step, and then we can do some question and answers in the chat room. So if you're not already signed in to StackBlitz, you can sign in with GitHub. That is next to the up here where I have my name. That's my name, Sam Stern OTA. You can sign in. You need to sign in with the same email address as you used in the Firebase console. Otherwise, this step won't work. If this step doesn't work for you, don't worry about it. This is totally optional, but I think it's really cool. So once you sign in, which I've already done, there will be a Firebase icon in the left-hand panel, which I have. And if you hit sign into Google, which again, I've already done, it'll show you all your Firebase projects. Now, which project was I working in? I was working in Fireweb codelab 2E3 something. That's this one. So I'm going to select it on StackBlitz. I'm going to say I want to deploy. Now, this is really crazy because in about 5 seconds, what we just did was take all of the code we wrote today and deploy it on Firebase hosting. To prove that, I could click this, but I'm actually going to go to the Firebase console. And I'm going to go over to hosting. And we can see here that I have an app. It was deployed just now. That's what time it is for me. And if I open the app, I have deployed a real website on Firebase hosting. This is actually my domain name. Everybody gets a free one, .web.app. If I sign in with the account I made before, I can see all of the messages that we wrote. It's me again. So in only 40 minutes, we were able to make a real website with authentication and a database and a chat room and deploy it with SSL security. And we did this completely for free. You can see here I'm on the free plan of Firebase. You probably are too. There's no charge for anything we did here. So I think that's pretty amazing. Now, the next step I'm not going to do with you. I hope that if anybody was able to follow the first 10 steps, you will do this at home. But basically, the bonus step will allow you to practice what we just learned and make sure that you can do it without me. I'll scroll through it really quickly. What you're going to do through the bonus step is make a new part of the app where people can say whether they're attending or not. And you're going to store that data in the database. You're going to write some more security rules. And you're going to make sure that your data is valid. You're going to read it back. So this is kind of like all of the things that you just learned. You'll be able to try again on your own. But I think that you will have a better time doing this without me, and you'll learn more. And that is the very last step. So like I said, if this was the first time you've ever used Firebase and you were successful, then pat yourself on the back because you just did a lot in only 40 minutes. If you want to learn more about Firebase, we have another web code lab that you can do, which will help you learn about things like push notifications, just generally more of our products for web. If you want to learn more about Firestore, we have a special code lab just for that. Or you can watch our video with my friend Todd here, who is on my team at the office when we're allowed to go. And you can check out our YouTube channel. If you have feedback about the code lab, there's a survey at the end here, or you can fill out the survey from this meetup. So thank you, everybody, for listening. And we have some time now to do about 10 or 15 minutes of question and answer. If people want to type their questions in the chat, questions about Firebase, either in English or hopefully somebody can help translate, then I will answer them. camera on. All right, so if you have any questions, put them in the comments. Okay, somebody asked which language we used. Today we used HTML and JavaScript, and the security rules are their own special language called Firebase Security Rules. It's a language that we invented. Of course, you can use Firebase on basically any language you want. You can use it on Android, iOS, Python, Java, Go, Ruby, anything you want. But today we just did JavaScript because it's very simple. Somebody asked, is there a codelab for Flutter? Yes, there absolutely is. If you Google Firebase codelab for Flutter, or if you search it on the codelab site, then you can learn how to make an app with Flutter. I love Flutter. Mohammed wants to know if we can upload our design database directly to Firebase. Not really. Firebase doesn't have the concept of a database schema, so you cannot upload one. Like you notice in this codelab, when we write a document, it got created automatically. So there's no such thing as a schema. Someone asked, what is the advantage of Firebase from others? It's a very hard question to ask. I will say that Firebase is amazing at letting you build an app quickly and securely and focus on the parts that you want to do. So when it only takes you an hour to make the authentication and the database, then it leaves you more time to get design and to do all of the parts that are really important and leave the infrastructure to us. I'm sorry, I don't understand the one question about the database words. I'm going to go to the next one. Mohammed wants to know, do we need to authenticate each listener we make? And second, what happens if you click the send button first? That's a great question. Firebase Authentication and Firestore talk to each other automatically. What you need to make sure is that you only start listening when you are authenticated, if that's what your rules say. Otherwise, your listener will fail. If you were to click send, if you were to go in this codelab and send something here while you were signed out, you would just see a JavaScript error or maybe a security rules error, depending on what happened. But it wouldn't, nothing would really break. Okay, someone asked, what is the difference between real-time database and Cloud Firestore? We have two databases, real-time database and Cloud Firestore. They're both very similar. For this codelab, we could have used either one. Cloud Firestore has much better capabilities for querying large amounts of data, and it has better capabilities for offline, and it also exists more regionally around the world. Real-time database is a little bit faster and is much better for writing very quickly, but is not so good at holding like terabytes of data. Omar says, how do you get the certificate? I assume that is the certificate for Firebase hosting. We certify that for you from Let's Encrypt. So we give you a free SSL certificate. You can actually upload your own domain. So you could buy a domain and attach it to Firebase hosting, and that's totally free as well. We'll put the certificate on there. How fast? Ibrahim wants to know, how fast is the Firebase database with large data? Another great question. In Cloud Firestore, the speed depends on how much data is returned, not how much data is in the database. So if you have 1 billion documents and you do a query and you only get 3 documents back, that's really fast because it only depends on the 3, not on the billion. But if you try to, so it's basically linear all the time. The more data that you bring back, the slower it is, but it doesn't matter how much data is in the database. Alicia says, please explain security rules. It is hard to explain in person. I would recommend watching the YouTube videos. But basically, it is a custom language that we wrote where you declare what type of security you want, and then every read and write for the database goes to the security rules first. If the security rules allow the request, then it moves on to the storage layer of the database to read or write the data. But otherwise, it gets completely denied. anything that you don't specify in security rules is automatically denied. So everything is secure by default. If you delete all of the rules, then we deny everything, which is exactly what you want to be most secure. Ramiz says, can I import a database to Firebase from Microsoft? No, you cannot. You can only import other Firebase databases. I believe I explained security on the web. Alicia wants to know if you can join from 2 collections. Another great question. No, you cannot. In a NoSQL database, there is no concept of join. So that may be uncomfortable for people who are used to SQL. What you normally want to do is store data in multiple places, so it's easy to fetch. Firestore also has sub-collections, which we did not get into, but you can store collections within collections to make your data deeper. Okay, that is the last question in the chat right now. I will wait around for 5 more minutes and see if there are any more questions. And if not, I will let everybody have their time back. Oh, here come more questions. Okay, will Firebase work with frameworks such as Spring Boot? I haven't done Spring Boot in a long time, but yes, Firebase has an SDK for Java. And we don't really care what framework you use to build your app. You can use whatever you want to build your app. Although on the front end, you're going to want to use the JavaScript SDK to communicate instead of doing server-side rendering, and that'll give you all the real-time stuff. But you can use any framework you want. Ramiz wants to know about GDPR protection. I am not a lawyer. Firebase is GDPR ready, meaning that you can be GDPR compliant on top of Firebase, but you do have to make sure to do everything right on your side as well. If you Google it, we have a whole page or many pages around privacy and data wipeout on Firebase to be GDPR compliant. Thank you, Omar B, for the compliment. I appreciate that. Khalid says, can I run JS code on my Django Flask website? Absolutely, you can. You'll have to provide your own Django or Flask backend. We don't provide a Python backend, but you can serve HTML, which includes the Firebase SDK, and you can query that from the front end, and you can query it on the back end in Python. So like I said, you can use anything you want to build a Firebase app. Some things are easier than others. We deal with a lot of JavaScript in Firebase, and so that's always helpful, but you can use anything you want. Someone asked, for Firebase, is it SQL or is it integrated with SQL? No, Firebase is a NoSQL database, and we have our own query language. Alicia is waiting for more classes on push notifications. Like I said, there's the other Firebase for Web codelab linked at the end of the one we did, and that one will teach you how to do push notifications, among many other things. Maybe I'll come back one day and do a presentation on that. Okay, let's do maybe 3 more questions, if anybody has any. Is there any limit to the number of messages? No. Firestore, there's no limit to what we will let you store. However, we charge per operation. So every time you read or write a message, there's a charge for that. Today we're using the free tier, which gives you about, I think, 20,000 messages a day, let's say. And then you would have to start paying. And then the rate is like 20 cents per 100,000 messages. So very cheap. We're talking fractions of a penny. But it is pay as you go. Everything on Firebase is pay as you go. So you only pay for what you use. All right. Okay, one more question. How about the backup? Firestore has support for export, but not backup. The difference between export and backup is that a backup is instantaneous and an export takes a little bit more time. So it's not a consistent snapshot. Backup is probably the most requested feature for Firestore, and we're working on it very hard. But right now we only have export, and you can read more online about that. All right, we'll do one more question, and then I will sign off. If anybody has one. Okay, I think we are out of questions. I want to say thank you so much to everybody who listened. I know that many of you are in Dubai or other places where it's late at night. That's really nice of you to stay up and listen to things about Firebase late at night. Last year I visited Dubai and Cairo and maybe met some of you. I really hope I get to come back in person in the future when we are all out of quarantine. Thank you so much and good luck. You can find me on Twitter or GitHub or wherever, and I'm always happy to answer more questions. Goodbye, everybody.